Yeah.
Okay, what I wanted to do is give my presentation that I gave at in La Plata, Argentina, and it's on the Escalante Building and Landscape Orientation and Documentation Study. Slightly remain documenting a cultural landscape. What is becoming increasingly apparent through time is that the study of cultural astronomy is really being brought into and incorporated into the study of landscape archaeology and cultural landscapes where it has a rightful place. And so the idea of what is a cultural landscape becomes the first question. And one of the definitions that the National Park Service has given is that a cultural landscape is a geographic area inclusive of its cultural and natural resources, including the geology, wildlife, domestic and botanical environments that represent a symbiosis of human activity in the environment. In other words, it's a totality of the landscape. It's not just an archaeological site. In the past, archaeologists go out and draw site boundaries around sites, and that is the site. They had not really go out farther than the site to the surrounding area, the biotic environment, the animals, the landscape itself, the distant horizon, and the sky, of course, itself too. What we're studying is cultural landscape. So what are the elements of a cultural landscape survey that we're trying to do? Throughout all of the entire process is first thing you have to do is create a research design. This involves asking questions. And one of the questions we have to ask is of the indigenous communities, the descendant communities, of what kind of questions do they want asked about their ancestral sites. So we have a consultation part built into every step of a cultural landscape survey. Research design involves questions, selecting a site, consultation, and getting the appropriate permits. The next step, of course, is a site assessment, one of which is learning about the site itself, its legacy data, its past use, past excavations and reports that have been done, and learning how to go into a site, greet a site, and the consultation that goes along with that. Field documentation is architectural documentation, horizon survey forms, which we're developing as part of this this project at Escalante Pueblo. And then there are the results of the survey.
Come here.
Assess the buildings, look at their orientation, look at their
They're starting to come loose here.
look at their how they're oriented on the landscape and how they line up with a landscape feature or astronomical events. Maxine?
$80.
Hang on. Thank you. Okay. So we have to share the results with the descendant communities, mostly is most important, and then publish results in peer-reviewed articles and publications. Research divine, you invest where for Escalante Pueblo, when we went up there, was to investigate the placement of the building, its orientation, and alignment. And those two words to me have a different meaning: orientation and alignment. Alignment is very precise with specific events or features. Orientation is in the neighborhood, doesn't have to be specific. There's precisely aligned. It can be attached to or looking toward a feature. One of the other things we are working at, and we're going to work through the workshop series, either in person or online, is developing new forms about how to record horizon features and test new technologies and methods. One of the things first thing we did was review the documentation of the Canyon of the Ancients. Escalante Pueblo is located within the Canyon of the Ancients National Monument in southwest Colorado near Dolores. It's the main site right by the new Canyon of the Ancients Visitor Center Museum, previously known as the Anasazi Heritage Center. So we reviewed the records from there, basically one book by Sandy Thompson, the Escalante community, and then the site report itself, which was done by David Brennernitz. or supervised by David Brenner. It's the original excavation of the site in the 1970s. We have to consult with dissenting communities again, learning about the questions, learning about the site, what parts of the site may be important that we don't normally see from our perspective, and document the site with the standard tools, measurement tapes, theodolites, those kinds of features. The other thing we're trying to do is test a few different kinds of more modern technologies, smartphone applications. There is a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration mobile magnetic field calculator, which will help you not only with your location, but to determine the magnetic declination that day in that vicinity. And also we're working with a lot more with photogrammetry, building three-dimensional models so they can be placed inside of a terrain model, which can then be placed into a terrain model with accurate horizon features, which then can be placed into larger astronomical programs such as Stellarium. We'll talk more about that later. Escalante Pueblo itself is about 23 rooms. Only about a third of it is excavated. This is the only excavated portion of the site, the kiva, and this set of rooms. Most of the site back over in here is not excavated. What the excavation showed that there were two very clear occupational phases. The first one was about 1130 CE, AD for the archaeologists. And then there was a later occupational period into the late 1100s, early 1200s. But one thing we did learn from the site report is that the architecture changed over time. The site itself, Escalante Great House Pueblo, is located on top of a prominent knoll or hill. And there are some other sites in the vicinity. The Reservoir Village site is just off to the little bit to the southwest, which is a great house, great kiva, tri-wall structure complex that immediately precedes in dating the Escalante Great House Pueblo, the first occupational phase there. So the folks at Reservoir Village were looking up to the top of the hill site next to them. One of the comments that we got from Mary Wiaki in our group was that the hilltop up at Escalante Pueblo was important before that place was built. And so this fits in with what we're seeing in the distribution of archaeological sites in the area.
Greg, you might mention that, and I'll do it. Mary is a member of the Tewa tribe, or Tewa speaking groups.
Yeah, she's
Santa Clara.
Santa Clara, one of the Tewa Pueblos, yes. Escalante Pueblo itself, this is how it appears today if you go up and visit it. This is the kiva, and this set of rooms over here are the ones that are excavated. The remainder of the Pueblo is unexcavated. What we learned from going into the archaeological record is that this block of rooms on the south here were added on in the later Mesa Verde reoccupational phase. Also, these two walls were dry laid walls, and Chacoan grade houses do not, the Chacoan style masonry do not do dry laid walls. That's a characteristic of Mesa Verde reoccupation. So if we were to imagine what this site looked like before this set of walls was built, and these two walls were built inside, and Kiva B out front, we would have a completely different looking Pueblo. Now, while this area is not excavated, it would be very likely that these walls are also the same as these, because if you make that, it's an assumption, but it's a valid assumption. You end up with a site that has much different geometry and appearance than the other great house. There's a great deal of symmetry and precision built into this site. So what we did is we set up various theodolites, took measurements, and what we did is we really paid attention to the orientation of the exterior walls. specifically the eastern wall and the southern wall, and also took a look at how the site was built from a perspective of this. The Kiva A was built first, all of the walls attached to it. So we know that Kiva A was built first. And so taking a center point at that, from that Kiva and extending it out to the corners, we started to take a look at the geometry of the Great House Pueblo itself. And this is what we came up with, is that the east wall is not true north-south. It's actually 5 degrees off of true north-south to the, orienting the site to the southwest, south-southwest. Very unusual in this area. And so we have it's not cardinally aligned, but it might be cardinally oriented. It's close. But they seem to have done a very specific job creating using triangular methods and also creating a 90-degree corners at these walls. And on the south wall, it's oriented to a peak, not to due east-west. And to the west, it's oriented off to the Bear's Ears, which is another another geographic feature at the distant horizon. Later on, when they rebuilt all these walls, the Mesa Verde people came in, or Mesa Verde reoccupation phase, about 1180 to about 1220. What we found is that they were very careful to maintain these relationships when they built this on. They maintained this 90-degree corner, this orientation to the north, this orientation to the east, and this orientation to the west. And the geometry was maintained too. So the people that came in with the Mesa Verde reoccupation period, they honored the structure. They honored the architecture that was existing there. So that was an attachment to that idea of that kind of architecture. And there's some thought that in the Mesa Verde, in the Mesa Verde reoccupation times, that there was an attempt to revitalize the Chacoan system, the Chacoan Great House system that existed in the area. But these orientations were maintained. We did not specifically find any astronomical alignments for the solstices or equinoxes, but we didn't need to have those in this site because of the topography. It's on a hilltop, an irregular horizon around it. One of the orientations here, this is the east wall looking north, and there is definitely an orientation to the set of peaks on the horizon. It's an otherwise flat horizon. It's not precisely on it, but it definitely goes out and grabs those peaks and brings them in. And off of the south wall of the Pueblo is oriented off to the east, is about here. But this is 5 degrees off. That's the top of Mount Hesperus. And Hesperus, how do you go back? There you go. Hesperus Peak is one of the sacred mountains. It's very important in the to many of the indigenous people, the descending communities today. Hesperus is there's a definite attachment to that peak. And the south wall also goes off to the Bear's Ears due to the haze and things like that. This day you really couldn't see it, but this is what the Bear's Ears. It forms a definite geographic feature on an otherwise flat horizon. So what we're seeing here is that these folks appear to be using the rooftops of the Kiva probably as their place to do their observations of solstices and equinoxes and such on the horizon, but they took this Pueblo and attached it to distant points on the horizon. And one of the things Ray, right after the conference, sent to me was a paper by Wes Bernardini and another co-author about landscape features, distant landscape features, and the attachment and how they bring these things into the village. So we're going to be taking a closer look at that one. But One of the important things that we did was a lot of photogrammetry, and this is the general photogrammetric picture of the photogrammetric model that we created. But yeah, this is the model we have of Escalante Pueblo, and you can see the edges are much more well defined. We're actually going out into the landscape so that we can import this into terrain models, but we don't have the distant horizon. That's what we have to incorporate this into terrain models for. But we have a fair amount of detail. What we need to do is continue refining this model and getting better architectural detail on the outside of the walls and inside the kiva so that we can continue to do our studies. Basic results of the study that we did, where that Escalante Great House Pueblo was constructed at the location and oriented to the landscape for a very specific purpose. We need to continue doing more documentation at the site, getting better, refining our measurements. It appears that both occupational phases, the Great House occupational phase started out, used geometric and symmetrical architectural construction characteristics to build the site. They very carefully built it. The only other site that I've seen that exhibits this kind of care in its geometry and its building symmetry is Sun Temple up at Mesa Verde National Park. A lot of the same geometrical principles were used in building that site, but it is a site that probably dates from 1220 through about 1280. So those kinds of principles may have been carried up into there. The characteristics were maintained by the reoccupation of Mesa Verde, maybe as a way of venerating that site or participating in the Chaco revitalization of the central Mesa Verde region. We did not observe any solar or lunar alignments. But again, that is, I think, chiefly because up on top of the kiva top, you had the irregular horizon around you. You didn't need to do it. You didn't need to put those alignments into the architecture or features. In fact, only rarely do they do that. Only rarely among the Puebloans today and everything graphic work, only rarely do they put it into the architecture itself or features. A small percentage primary way, and Steve McCluskey confirmed this, it's all about horizon calendars. And from here, they have a beautiful, wonderful horizon calendar available to them. But we have to go back and document it more. I just wanted to thank everybody in the crew, especially Canyon Ancients National Monument folks, Ray O'Neill, the monument manager. He was the person that signed off on our drone permit. And I'm sorry, Ray, but yes, you do need to have a permit to fly a drone at Jackson's Castle. It's in the monument.
Well, yes. You have to catch me first.
I know, that's true. Okay, Vince McMillan at the monument is our monument archaeologist, and he was very instrumental in helping us. And our crew, myself, Rick Allen, Chris Dombrowski, Ray, Dude Valentine, Mary Wacky, and Lawrence Katernak, partner. We all work together on this project, and we hope to have them and a lot of you working with us in the future. And so, for the future, what does 2023 look like? Our field season for 2023, we have lots of options. We are going to continue working at Escalante Pueblo. We have to do more documentation over the winter, help them develop their graphics and get the information that we have developed and are developing out to the public through their interpretive programs. There are a couple of sites that I would like to try and visit to do some work at this coming year. Well, this is one of them, and I'm not sure why this is up here. This is one of the Yellow Jacket Pueblo solar monolith documentation project. It's this Yellow Jacket Pueblo is a large pueblo. It's one of the largest pueblos in the region. And it's on Archaeological Conservancy land. And this monolith is one that Kim Malville documented as being aligned to the summer solstice sunrise over Lizard Head some 20 years ago. 25 years ago. And I had an opportunity to visit this place, and the monolith is leaning now. It's being pushed over by a bush. And it will probably likely fall at some point. We may not be able to stop it due to, but what we need to do is document it. I don't know if there's ever been any good documentation done here. There's also a model that I did of this site, but it's much cruder and kind of hard to look at. But the other site I would like to see, Ray and I went out to visit recently. Come on. Is Wallace Pueblo, that is owned by Bruce Bradley. Bruce Bradley is very large, is one of the top archaeologists in the region in the Southwest. And he happens to personally own his own great house, Pueblo. It's a long story. But when we visited there, he invited our group to come in and do some work, landscape surveys. There might be a connection between Wallace and the great houses to the north of it, including Escalante, and to Yucca House National Monument down below. This place has a very unique architectural feature. It's this right in here. It's this masonry staircase. It's the only time I've ever seen a masonry staircase anywhere in the Southwest in any excavation. They did, stepping stones, but this is a full-on masonry staircase, and it comes from these rooms here up on top and out onto the roof of this kiva. And the horizon again around the area is wonderful for doing horizon studies. And then we also have this little staircase that needs to be documented because it's very important. The other thing, feature about this kiva is that it appears, and this is the only one I've seen it in, and Bruce Bradley showed me, is it appears that the top walls of the kiva are actually domed in. They started to build it in a dome shape. And that has some implications for possibly, recreating the sky. So we have an opportunity to do some work at Wallace Great House. We don't have a lot of restrictions. What we need to do is talk to Bruce about documentation and what he'd like to do, but we have an invitation to come into this site and do some work. So
where is the site? Where is the site in relation to Cortez?
It's about 2 or 3 miles due south of my house.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's very easy, convenient, easy to get to.
Yeah, and about 2 or 3 miles east of Cortez.
Okay, so very close. That's super.
Oh yeah, and it's easy to get to.
Exactly.
Easy to get to, yeah. And right now, his level of documentation is basically taking pictures and doing some general wall, maps. So we could really do some good work here with photogrammetry. And he doesn't do anything with photogrammetry right now. So we've got an invitation to come in and do some work here.
Okay, that sounds perfect.
Yeah, and help that out because it's a very complex site. Very complex in its history and what happened at the site.
Bruce is good at getting people to come and help because when we were there, he had, I don't know, a dozen people.
Yeah, I think that's the crew from led by Karen Kinnear. I know her, and it probably is the Sassanum chapter excavation.
Oh yeah, that's probably right. Yeah,
that's one thing I also want to ask him to do when I goes. I want Bruce and the gang there to teach me how to excavate. So be a part of the crew next year a little bit too. But yeah, this is it's a very cool staircase. I did a little 3D model of it too. But we're getting on there for our time. So.
Oh, you can get it.
I see this one.
Yep.
So that's what the staircase looked like. I did this from a crappy little camera that I took about 10 minutes of photographs.
Well, that shows the power of photogrammetry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's going to backfill this particular feature next year. So we need to get a really good photogrammetric model done of this before he backfills it, or any of this site gets backfilled, because it's easy to go out there and take the pictures. And also, we can use the pictures that he already has.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get out of that. How do we get out of that? Okay. How do we get back? Okay, what I wanted to do right now is just kind of take out a little, that's the end of the program. Yeah, are there any questions for me on my program?
Yeah, Evelyn wanted to know about the dates of the Wallace.
Wallace?
No, not Wallace, but this
Escalante?
no,
The Wallace Great House Pueblo.
Bruce's. Wallace's.
Okay, yeah.
Wallace
The dates
Great
on
House.
it are, I'd have to find my note sheet on that, but they all go all the way from contemporary, so, you know, from what I understand, it's about 1080 all the way up through about 1220, 1230. There was a Masonry
part of a-
occupation phase there too, a minor one.
Yeah. It's part of a larger group of pueblos in the immediate area.
Yeah, right north of it
Pretty
is
dense.
it's Wallace, Ida Jean, and one other one, all within sight of each other. Great House Pueblos, and they're all on private property.
I don't have a question, Greg, but I have an observation I'd like to throw out. I thought it was really cool how you showed that Escalante was oriented towards the horizon landscape. But I also found it interesting, and I'm not proposing that there's any kind of connection, but the 5-degree offset from north is what Timothy Pocketot calls the Cahokia grid for the entire site, and surrounding communities are all share this 5-degree offset from north.
And there's another site I could point to right now, Casa Grande, the great house, the big house at Casa Grande.
Mm-hmm.
It's also 4 degrees off on true north-south. It's cocked off in the same direction. So there's something to it. Yes, there's something to
Cahokia,
it.
right. At Cahokia, it's oriented towards earlier burials, but it's interesting to speculate that maybe that site was chosen for its, or placed based upon its orientation towards the horizon features.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely is the case there, is that they actually went up on top of that hill. They were doing things up on top of that hill long before that Pueblo was there, as Mary pointed out to us. And then when they built it, they didn't do it north-south, true north-south, east-west. I think they definitely connected into those horizon features. And I got to read this paper by Wes Bernardini to really talk more about that.
And by the way, that is a really good example of why it's wonderful to have a native person, in this case, in Mary's case, she has some experience and background in archaeology, and works for the what is it, New Mexico?
State of New Mexico, yeah, Historic Preservation Office.
Right.
No,
Thanks.
archaeology. She works for Eric Lindman, state archaeologist.
Yeah. So she has a lot to offer from her cultural background with the tribe, but also she knows the archaeology community as well.
No, very much the case.